The cemetery sat on a barren hill outside Cedar Ridge, where the wind never stopped howling and the earth was too stubborn to grow anything but sagebrush. November rain had turned the dirt road into mud, and the small gathering of townspeople huddled against the cold, their face hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats and worn shawls. Samuel McAllister stood at the back of the crowd, his weathered hands clasped before him. At 43, he'd attended enough burials to know the rhythm of grief, but this one felt different. The pine coffin they lowered into the ground held Sarah Henley, barely 19, who'd arrived in town 6 months ago with no husband and a belly swollen with child. Now she was gone, having breathed her last, bringing twins into the world. Reverend Dawson's voice carried thin on the wind. "The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." His words fell flat against the gray sky, offering little comfort to the handful of mourners who'd come more out of duty than affection. Sarah had kept to herself, taking in washing and mending to survive, speaking to few and trusting fewer. As the first shovelful of dirt hit the coffin, whispers rippled through the crowd. Samuel caught fragments. Poor creatures. No father to speak of. What's to become of them? He knew they meant the babies. A boy and a girl born 3 days ago, currently in the care of Mrs. Thompson, the midwife who'd failed to save their mother. The crowd began to disperse before the grave was half filled. Samuel watched them go, their backs turned quickly on the unfortunate dead. Mayor Hutchins walked past, shaking his head. Shame about the young woman. Thompson says the babes are healthy enough, but Lord knows what'll happen to them now. The county orphanage in Millbrook, suggested Mr. Garrett, the bank clerk. That's where foundlings go. In Millbrook's a 2-day ride in good weather, the mayor replied, and with winter coming. He didn't finish the thought, but everyone knew what he meant. The orphanage was overcrowded, underfunded, and had a reputation that made decent folk shudder. Samuel remained as the others left, watching the gravediggers finish their work. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low and heavy. He'd come to pay respects to a woman he'd barely known, drawn by some impulse he couldn't name. Maybe it was the loneliness that recognized itself in another soul, or maybe it was something else entirely. When the last mourner had gone, Samuel walked down the hill toward town, his boots squelched in the mud, and his coat, the same one Martha had mended for him 15 years ago, hung heavy with dampness. The main street of Cedar Ridge stretched before him, the general store, the saloon, the hotel, and Mrs. Thompson's house at the far end where she did her midwifing. He found a crowd gathered on her porch, voices raised in discussion. Mrs. Thompson, a stout woman of 60 with iron-gray hair, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "I've done my Christian duty," she was saying. "Kept them 3 days and nights, fed them goat's milk every 2 hours, but I've got my own family to tend. Someone else needs to step forward." "What about the Millers?" someone suggested. "They've been wanting children." "The Millers left for California last month," another voice countered. "Couldn't make a go of it here." Samuel pushed through the crowd until he could see into the house. There, in a wooden crate lined with blankets, lay 2 tiny forms. They were awake but quiet, their eyes unfocused, their small fists waving in the air. Something twisted in his chest, a feeling he'd thought long buried with Martha and their stillborn son. "No takers, then, Mrs." Thompson's voice had an edge of desperation. "I can't keep them indefinitely. If no one claims them by tomorrow, they'll have to go to Millbrook." The crowd murmured and shifted, but no one spoke up. Samuel watched their faces, shopkeepers, ranchers, wives, all finding reasons to look away. Times were hard. The drought last summer had left many struggling. Children were blessings, sure, but they were also mouths to feed. And these 2 came with nothing but the clothes they were wrapped in. "Might be a family somewhere," offered Mrs. Paulson, the minister's wife. "Perhaps we should wait, make inquiries." Sarah Henley had no one, Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "I asked her myself when she first came to me. Said she was alone in the world. And these babies would be too if anything happened to her. Her voice caught slightly. Poor girl knew she might not make it. Too narrow in the hips, and the baby's positioned wrong. I did everything I could. The crowd began to disperse again. Duty observed. Consciences somewhat eased by having shown up at all. Samuel remained on the porch, unable to move. Through the window, he could see one of the babies had started to cry, a thin, reedy sound that seemed to echo across the empty spaces in his heart. You planning to stand there all day, Sam McAllister? Mrs. Thompson fixed him with a sharp look. Or did you have business here? Samuel removed his hat, turning it in his hands. Could I see them? Something in the midwife's face softened. She'd delivered the son he and Martha had lost, had been there for Martha's passing too. Come in then, but be quiet about it. They've just had their feeding. The house smelled of carbolic and boiled milk. Samuel approached the makeshift crib slowly, as if the babies might disappear if he moved too fast. Up close, he could see their features more clearly. The boy had a shock of dark hair, while the girl was nearly bald. Both had the reddish, wrinkled look of the newly born, but they were good-sized for twins. Boy's the elder by 10 minutes. Mrs. Thompson said, both strong lungs when they want to use them. Been calling them boy and girl, but they'll need proper names soon enough. Samuel reached out tentatively, letting the girl grasp his finger. Her grip was surprisingly strong, and something inside him broke open like a dam. He thought of Martha, of the nursery they'd prepared that stood empty all these years, of the long nights alone with just the wind for company. I'll take them. The words were out before he could think them through. Mrs. Thompson stared at him, her mouth slightly open. Sam, you can't be serious. You're a bachelor, living alone on that ranch 5 miles out. What do you know about raising babies? Nothing, he admitted. But I can learn, and they'll have food, shelter, warmth. That's more than Millbrook can promise. The whole town will talk. A single man taking in 2 infants, it's not proper. You'll need help. A wet nurse at the very least. I'll manage with goat's milk, same as you've been doing. And I'll hire help if needed. His jaw set stubbornly. A look Mrs. Thompson recognized from years past. These children need a home. I have one to give. The midwife studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Lord help us all. All right, Sam, but you'll stay here tonight. Learn how to feed them proper, how to change them. And you'll need supplies, bottles, clothes, napkins. This isn't something you do on a whim. It's not a whim, Samuel said quietly, still looking at the babies. The girl had fallen asleep holding his finger, and her brother was making small, cooing sounds. Maybe it's foolishness, but it's not a whim. As word spread through the house and onto the street, Samuel prepared for the weight of public opinion. Let them talk, he thought. He'd been the subject of gossip before. Poor Sam McAllister. Lost his wife and child. Lives like a hermit out on that failing ranch. Now they'd have something new to discuss. But as he looked down at the 2 small lives that had suddenly become his responsibility, Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. These children, born in sorrow and abandoned by circumstance, needed someone who wouldn't turn away. And perhaps, though he hardly dared think it, he needed them just as much. The rain began again as evening fell, drumming on Mrs. Thompson's roof. In the distance, thunder rolled across the prairie, but inside, by the warmth of the stove. Samuel McAllister began his first lesson in fatherhood. 15 years late, but finally arrived. The ranch house sat 5 miles from Cedar Ridge, a modest structure of weathered wood and stone that seemed to grow from the prairie itself. Samuel carried the babies inside, one in each arm, while the cold November wind rattled the windows and whistled through gaps in the walls he'd never bothered to fix. The place had been built for a family, but for 15 years it had sheltered only one man and his ghosts. He laid the twins carefully in the bed he'd hastily prepared, a dresser drawer lined with his softest blankets. Positioned near the stove, they stirred but didn't wake, exhausted from the jarring wagon ride. Samuel stood over them, suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become without the creaking wheels and neighing horses. Just the wind, the settling wood, and the soft breathing of two infants who depended on him entirely. The first night was a symphony of disasters. The boy woke first, his cries sharp and demanding. Samuel fumbled with the bottle misses. Thompson had given him, spilling more goat's milk on his shirt than he got into the baby's mouth. Just as the boy settled, his sister began wailing. Back and forth it went, a relay of hunger and discomfort that left Samuel hollow-eyed by dawn. He'd moved his rocking chair, Martha's chair, unused these 15 years, next to their makeshift crib. Sometime near morning, with both babies finally quiet, he dozed fitfully. In his half-dreams, he heard Martha's voice, gentle and amused. "You're holding them too tight. Sam, babies aren't calves. They won't run off." He woke with a start to find the girl watching him with dark, solemn eyes. Early sunlight filtered through the curtains Martha had sewn, casting familiar patterns on the floor. The boy still slept, one tiny fist pressed against his cheek. "Morning, little one," Samuel whispered. "Suppose you'll be wanting breakfast." This time he managed the feeding better, remembering Mrs. Thompson's instructions about testing the milk's temperature on his wrist. The girl drank steadily, her eyes never leaving his face. When she finished, he attempted to burp her as shown, feeling absurdly large and clumsy. A wet warmth spread across his shoulder, and he grimaced. Another shirt for the wash, if he could remember how to do laundry proper. By the third day, he'd developed something resembling a routine. Wake with the first cry. Warm the milk while bouncing whichever baby was fussing. Feed one while the other waited, more or less patiently. Change sodden napkins. Rock them back to sleep. Then start the cycle again. He moved through the tasks mechanically, driven by necessity rather than knowledge. The ranch work suffered. Cattle needed tending. Fences wanted mending. And the approaching winter demanded preparations he couldn't make while tied to the house. But every time he considered riding to town for help, he looked at the twins and stayed put. They were his responsibility now, freely chosen. On the fourth night, exhaustion finally overtook him completely. Both babies had been fretful all day, refusing milk, crying in turns. The boy had developed a rash that worried Samuel, though he didn't know if it was serious or common. Near midnight, with both twins wailing and his own head pounding, Samuel sank into the rocking chair and did something he hadn't done since Martha died. He prayed. "Lord, I don't know what I'm doing," he said aloud, his voice rough. "These children need better than I can give. Show me the way, or send help, or something." As if in answer, the girl's cries softened to whimpers. Samuel picked her up, holding her against his chest, and began to rock. Without thinking, he started humming an old hymn Martha used to sing while working. "Shall we gather at the river?" The melody rusty but true. The baby quieted, her small body relaxing against him. Encouraged, he reached for the boy with his free arm, settling both against his chest. The chair creaked rhythmically as he rocked, still humming. Gradually, miraculously, both babies calmed. Within minutes, they were asleep. Samuel kept rocking, afraid to stop. In the lamplight, he studied their faces, so different already, though they'd shared the same womb. The girl had delicate features and a determined chin. The boy's face was rounder, his expression peaceful in sleep. They needed names, proper names, not just boy and girl. His eyes fell on Martha's Bible, sitting on the mantel where he'd left it 15 years ago. Carefully, still holding the babies, he reached for it with one hand. The leather cover was dusty but intact. He opened it to the family pages, where Martha had written their names in her careful script. Samuel James McAllister, born April 3rd, 1825, Martha Ann Williams McAllister, born June 12th, 1830, married May 15th, 1850. Below that, in shakier writing, she'd added, "Baby McAllister, born and died November 20th, 1858. Samuel traced the words with one finger, remembering Martha's tears as she'd insisted on recording their son's brief existence. He was here, she'd said. He mattered. He turned the pages carefully, looking for inspiration. In Genesis, he found them. Jacob and Esther. Strong names, biblical names, names with weight and history. Jacob, who wrestled with angels. Esther, who saved her people. Yes, these would do. Jacob and Esther McAllister, he said aloud, testing the sound. My children. The words hung in the air, a declaration and a promise. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. But inside, in the circle of lamplight, Samuel held his children and remembered what it felt like to have a future worth planning for. The next morning brought new challenges. Jacob developed a cough that sent Samuel into a panic. He bundled both babies and rode to town, pride forgotten in the face of fear. Dr. Morrison, gruff but competent, examined the boy and prescribed a tonic. Nothing serious, he assured Samuel. Babies catch things. You'll see worse before they're grown. He paused, studying Samuel over his spectacles. You sure about this? McAllister? Taking on 2 infants alone? I'm sure, Samuel said, though he felt anything but. The doctor nodded slowly. Well, you'll need supplies and knowledge. My wife has some books on child rearing. I'll have her send them out. On the ride home, Samuel stopped at the general store. Mrs. Garrett served him, her face a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. Bottles, Samuel said firmly. And whatever else babies need, cloth for napkins, safety pins, a proper crib if you have one. She gathered the items silently, but as she tallied the bill, she couldn't resist commenting. The whole town's talking. Mr. McAllister, a bachelor raising 2 newborns. It isn't natural. Neither is letting them go to an orphanage when there's a home available, Samuel replied, counting out coins. Thank you for the supplies. Back at the ranch, he settled the twins and surveyed his purchases. The cost had been dear, money he'd saved for winter supplies, but necessary. He'd make do somehow. He always had. That night, as he sat in the rocking chair with Jacob and Esther sleeping in their new crib beside him, Samuel opened Martha's Bible again. This time, he wrote in the family pages, Jacob Samuel McAllister, born November 17, 1873. Esther Martha McAllister, born November 17, 1873. Adopted by Samuel McAllister, November 23, 1873. He set down the pen and looked at the sleeping babies. In the morning, he'd need to milk the goat, tend the stock, patch the roof before snow came. He'd need to learn about teething and fevers, first words and first steps. He'd need to be mother and father both, in a world that would judge him for trying. But tonight, in the quiet house that no longer felt empty, Samuel McAllister allowed himself to hope. He'd lost his first family to God's mysterious ways. Now, through those same mysterious ways, he'd been given a second chance. He wouldn't waste it. Sleep well, my children, he whispered, and for the first time in 15 years, the words didn't catch in his throat. Outside, the prairie wind sang its endless song, but inside, a family was beginning. The woman arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Samuel had taken the twins. He was attempting to wash napkins in a tub behind the house. Jacob balanced on one hip while Esther slept in a basket nearby. When he heard the approaching buggy, by the time he'd dried his hands and come around front, she was already climbing down, a woman in her 30s wearing a traveling dress of dark blue wool and a bonnet that couldn't quite contain her auburn hair. Mr. McAllister? Her voice carried the refined tones of Eastern education. I'm Margaret Sinclair. Sarah Henley was my cousin. Samuel's grip tightened on Jacob, who was gumming his fist contentedly. Mrs. Thompson said Sarah had no family. Miss Sinclair, she corrected, removing her gloves with precise movements. And Sarah wouldn't have mentioned me. We'd been estranged since she left Baltimore. I only learned of her situation through a letter from a mutual acquaintance. Her eyes fixed on Jacob with an intensity that made Samuel step back. These are her children. They're my children now, Samuel said carefully. Been caring for them since their mother's burial. Miss Sinclair's lips pressed into a thin line. May I come in? We have matters to discuss. Against his better judgment, Samuel led her inside. The house was in disarray, bottles on every surface, napkins draped over chairs to dry. The smell of sour milk permeating everything. If Miss Sinclair was dismayed by the bachelor household, she didn't show it. Her attention remained fixed on Jacob. May I hold him? Samuel hesitated, then carefully transferred the baby. Miss Sinclair held Jacob with practiced ease, studying his features. He has the Henley nose, she murmured. And Sarah's eyes. She looked up sharply. Where is the girl? Sleeping. Samuel moved protectively toward Esther's basket. Miss Sinclair, why are you here? She settled into a chair without invitation, still holding Jacob. I've come for the children, naturally. Sarah may have died in unfortunate circumstances, but these babies have family, proper family. They have family here, Samuel said, his voice hardening. I've been recognized by the town as their guardian. By what authority? Are there legal papers, a judge's decree? Miss Sinclair's smile was cold. I think not. You're a stranger who took advantage of a tragic situation. While I appreciate your charity, it's no longer needed. Samuel felt the old stubbornness rising, the same that had kept him on this ranch through drought and loss. With respect, Miss Sinclair, where were you when your cousin needed help? When she was washing clothes for pennies, pregnant and alone. Color rose in the woman's cheeks. Sarah made her choices. She left a respectable home, threw away her future for... She stopped, composing herself. That's past. What matters now is these children's welfare. Which is why they're staying here, Samuel said firmly. They're fed, warm, and cared for. That's more than you offered their mother. Miss Sinclair stood abruptly, causing Jacob to whimper. She handed him back with visible reluctance. You think you can raise 2 infants alone? A man with no wife, no experience with children. The town must be scandalized. The town's opinions don't keep babies fed at 2 in the morning, Samuel replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, they'll be wanting their noon feeding soon. But Miss Sinclair wasn't finished. She pulled a letter from her reticule. I've already been to town, Mr. McAllister, spoken with Mayor Hutchins and Judge Crawford. They agree that blood relations have stronger claim than... She looked around the disheveled room. Charitable strangers. Samuel's heart sank, but he kept his face impassive. Judge Crawford's in Millbrook. Won't be back for circuit court until spring. I can wait. She moved toward Esther's basket, but Samuel blocked her path. I'm staying at the hotel in town. I'll be filing a formal petition for custody. The law is quite clear on these matters. The law also considers the children's welfare, Samuel said. And who's been providing for them? Miss Sinclair's eyes narrowed. You speak as if a few weeks of caretaking erases blood ties. These children belong with their mother's family, where they can be raised properly. The girl especially needs feminine guidance. Their mother's family that cast her out? Samuel's voice was quiet, but cutting. That left her to face childbirth alone? We didn't cast her out. She left. For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across Miss Sinclair's face. She was headstrong, romantic. Thought she was in love with a traveling man who filled her head with promises. When father forbade the match, she ran away. We tried to find her, but not very hard. Samuel finished. Miss Sinclair straightened, armor back in place. I won't debate past mistakes with you, Mr. McAllister. I've come to correct them. These children will have advantages with me. Education, society, proper upbringing. What can you offer? A failing ranch and the life of a hermit? Samuel looked down at Jacob, who had grasped his finger and was studying it with intense concentration. From her basket, Esther made small waking sounds. I can offer them love, he said simply. A father's love. You're not their father, Miss Sinclair said sharply. You're a lonely man trying to fill an empty house. The words hit home. But Samuel didn't flinch. Maybe so, but I'm the one who stayed when everyone else walked away. I'm the one who's been walking the floors at night, learning their cries, celebrating when they first smiled. That has to count for something. Miss Sinclair gathered her gloves and bonnet. It counts for kindness, Mr. McAllister. But kindness isn't kinship. I'll return with the proper authorities. She paused at the door, looking back. I am grateful that you cared for them when no one else would. But now family is here. Surely you can see that's best. After she left, Samuel sank into his chair, still holding Jacob. Esther was fully awake now, making hungry sounds. He prepared their bottles mechanically, his mind racing. He'd known this day might come, had feared it in the dark hours of the night. But knowing didn't make it easier. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Samuel rode to the neighboring ranch. Tom Wheeler was his nearest neighbor and closest thing to a friend, a man who'd lost his own wife to fever 2 summers back. Legal trouble, Tom said after hearing the story. He poured whiskey for them both. Blood counts heavy in court, Sam. And a woman relative against a bachelor? That's a hard fight. I can't lose them. Tom. Samuel stared into his glass. It'd be like losing Martha and the baby all over again. Tom was quiet for a moment. You could marry, quick-like. A wife would even the odds. Samuel shook his head. What woman would have me? And for such a reason, it wouldn't be fair. Fair's got nothing to do with it when children are at stake. Tom said pragmatically, think on it at least. Riding home under cold stars. Samuel did think on it, but every possibility seemed impossible. The widow Collins was too old, the Garrett girl too young, and none of them would want a ready-made family of infant twins and a grieving rancher. Back home, he checked on the sleeping babies. They lay close together, as if seeking the warmth they'd shared in the womb. Jacob's hand rested on Esther's arm protectively. Samuel touched each small head gently, feeling the weight of impending loss. In the morning, he'd ride to Millbrook himself, see about a lawyer. He'd fight with whatever weapons the law allowed. But tonight, he simply sat beside their crib and kept watch, storing up memories against the possibility of empty arms. I won't let her take you, he whispered. Not without a fight. You're mine now, whatever the law says, and I'm yours. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, and the wind carried the sound across the empty prairie. But inside the small circle of lamplight, a father guarded his children's sleep and prepared for the battle ahead. The Cedar Ridge Courthouse was little more than a converted barn, its walls still smelling faintly of hay and horses. On this March morning, with snow melting into mud outside, it served as the setting for a custody hearing that had divided the town. Samuel sat on one of the rough benches, Jacob and Esther in a basket beside him, trying not to fidget with his collar. His one good suit, unused since Martha's funeral, felt strange against his work-hardened frame. Judge Crawford, a stern man with steel-gray whiskers, had arrived the previous evening for his spring circuit. He sat behind a makeshift desk, reviewing papers while the small courtroom filled with curious townspeople. Miss Sinclair occupied the opposite bench, accompanied by a lawyer from Millbrook, Mr. Harrison Weatherby, whose polished appearance made Samuel acutely aware of his own rough edges. This hearing will determine custody of the minor children known as Jacob and Esther, Judge Crawford began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Born November the 17th to one Sarah Henley, deceased. Miss Margaret Sinclair, maternal cousin. Petitions for guardianship against Samuel McAllister, who has had temporary care of said children. Mr. Weatherby rose smoothly. Your Honor, the case is quite simple. My client is blood kin to these unfortunate orphans. She offers them a home of refinement in Baltimore, education, and the advantages of civilized society. She has both the means and the familial obligation to care for her cousin's children. The judge nodded. And, Mr. McAllister, do you have representation? Samuel stood, his hat in his hands. No, sir. Just myself and the truth. A ripple of sympathy ran through the crowd. Mrs. Thompson, sitting in the back, nodded encouragingly. Then speak your piece, the judge said, not unkindly. Samuel cleared his throat. Your Honor, I've cared for these children since the day their mother was buried. When everyone else walked away, I stayed. I've been their father in all but blood for 4 months now. 4 months. Mr. Weatherby interjected. Compared to a lifetime of blood connection, Your Honor. While we appreciate Mr. McAllister's charity, temporary care does not constitute parental rights. Judge Crawford raised a hand for silence. Miss Sinclair, tell me about your relationship with Sarah Henley. Miss Sinclair stood gracefully. Sarah was my younger cousin. Your Honor, we were raised almost as sisters until she left home at 17. I deeply regret our estrangement and seek to make amends by caring for her children. And why was she estranged? Samuel asked, earning a sharp look from the judge. Mr. McAllister, you'll have your turn. Judge Crawford warned. Miss Sinclair. Color touched her cheeks. Sarah formed an unfortunate attachment to an unsuitable man. When my father, her guardian after her parents died, forbade the match, she eloped. The man abandoned her, and pride, I suppose, kept her from returning home. Where was this home? The judge asked. Baltimore, Your Honor, where I still reside with my father. We have a comfortable house, servants, connections to good schools. The judge made notes. And you, Mr. McAllister, what can you offer these children? Samuel looked down at the twins, who were beginning to fuss. Without thinking, he picked up Esther, who immediately quieted against his shoulder. I offer them a father's love, Your Honor, a home, maybe not fancy, but warm and safe. I offer them the life their mother chose when she came west, the freedom of open country, honest work. Can you provide for them financially? Mr. Weatherby pressed. Your ranch, I understand, is mortgaged? Samuel's jaw tightened. I manage. The children want for nothing. Nothing except proper education, social standing, maternal care, Miss Sinclair added. Your Honor, look at him. A bachelor trying to mother infants. It's unnatural. As if in response, Jacob began to cry. Without hesitation, Samuel shifted Esther to one arm and picked up the boy with the other, bouncing them both gently. Both children settled immediately, Esther playing with his collar button while Jacob sucked his thumb. Seems natural enough to me. Someone in the crowd muttered, Mrs. Thompson. Samuel thought. Judge Crawford studied the scene thoughtfully. Mr. McAllister, the court must consider the children's long-term welfare. A single man raising 2 children, especially a girl child. Presents, complications. Then let me address those complications. Your Honor. A new voice from the doorway made everyone turn. Tom Wheeler entered, followed by Reverend Dawson and, surprisingly, Dr. Morrison and his wife. And you are? The judge asked. Thomas Wheeler, Your Honor, Mr. McAllister's neighbor. I've come to speak on his behalf, if the court permits. Judge Crawford gestured for him to continue. I've watched Sam these past months, Tom said. Seen him sacrifice his own needs for those babies. He sold his best bull to buy them supplies. Works his ranch at night so he can tend them during the day. If that's not a father's devotion, I don't know what is. Dr. Morrison stepped forward. I've treated the children several times. They're thriving under Mr. McAllister's care. Healthy, well-fed, clearly loved. As a medical man, I see no reason to disturb their placement. The church supports Mr. McAllister, Reverend Dawson added. He brings the children to services, seeks guidance on their upbringing. The congregation has embraced them as our own. Mr. Weatherby looked irritated. Touching testimonials, but they don't change the law. Blood relations have precedence. Actually, a quiet voice said, they don't always. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Morrison holding a thick book. Forgive me, Your Honor, but I've been reading territorial law. The precedent in Carson versus Bellway clearly states that when children have been abandoned and subsequently cared for by a non-relative, the court must weigh the established bond against blood claims. Judge Crawford looked intrigued. You're familiar with territorial law, Mrs. Morrison? I was a teacher before I married. Your Honor, I believe in being thorough. She approached the bench. May I? As the judge reviewed the cited case. Miss Sinclair grew agitated. This is ridiculous. I'm family. That should matter. It does matter, Samuel said quietly. But so does being there. Where were you when Sarah needed help? When she was sick and afraid? When these babies were born into the world with no one to claim them? I didn't know. But you could have. If family mattered so much, you would have found her. Samuel's voice remained calm, but his words carried weight. I'm not their blood, that's true. But I'm the one who walks the floor when they're sick. I'm the one who knows that Jacob sleeps better on his stomach and Esther likes to hold a finger while she eats. I'm the one who promised them they'd never be alone. The courtroom had gone silent. Even the twins were quiet, as if sensing the moment's importance. Judge Crawford set down the law book. Miss Sinclair, what are your intentions regarding the children's names? She looked puzzled. Their names? Mr. McAllister has given them names. Jacob and Esther McAllister. Would you keep those names? I suppose I'd name them properly. Family names. Sinclair names. The judge nodded slowly. I see. He was quiet for a long moment, then spoke. The court recognizes the complex nature of this case. Blood ties are significant, but so is the bond formed through care and devotion. These children have known only one parent, Mr. McAllister. To remove them now. Your Honor, Mr. Weatherby protested. Surely you're not suggesting. I'm suggesting nothing. I'm ruling. Judge Crawford's voice was firm. The court finds that the best interests of the children are served by remaining with Mr. McAllister. However, he raised a hand to still Miss Sinclair's objection. This custody is conditional. Samuel's heart nearly stopped. Conditional? You will submit to monthly visits from a court-appointed observer. I suggest Mrs. Morrison. If she's willing, you will ensure the children receive proper education when they're of age. And Miss Sinclair will be permitted to correspond with the children and visit twice yearly, if she desires. This is outrageous, Miss Sinclair said, standing abruptly. They're my blood. And they're his children, the judge replied. Blood makes kin. Miss Sinclair, but love makes family. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and movement. Samuel stood frozen, hardly daring to believe. Then Jacob gurgled and reached for his face, and reality rushed back. They were his, legally, officially, permanently his. Miss Sinclair approached, her face a mask of controlled fury. This isn't over. I'll appeal. That's your right, Samuel said quietly. But think about what's best for them. They're happy. They're loved. Isn't that what Sarah would have wanted? For a moment, her composure cracked. Sarah would have wanted many things, she said softly. Then, straightening, I'll be watching. Mr. McAllister. Any sign of neglect, any hint of impropriety, and I'll be back. She swept out, Mr. Weatherby trailing behind. The townspeople crowded around Samuel, offering congratulations, but he barely heard them. He was looking at his children, and feeling the weight of victory mixed with responsibility. Come on, Sam, Tom Wheeler said, clapping his shoulder. Let's get these little ones home. As they left the courthouse, Samuel caught sight of Miss Sinclair's buggy heading east, back toward the life she'd offered the twins. He felt a moment of doubt. Could he really give them everything they needed? Then Esther yawned and nestled against his chest, and Jacob grabbed his thumb with fierce baby strength. And he knew. He might not offer them Baltimore society or fancy schools, but he could give them love, stability, and the wide-open sky of the frontier. It would have to be enough. And somehow, he thought as he headed toward home, it would be. The stranger arrived on a sweltering July afternoon, when the twins were 8 months old and the ranch was drowning in summer heat. Samuel had rigged a canvas shade over the porch where Jacob and Esther played on a blanket, their chubby hands exploring wooden blocks Tom Wheeler had carved for them. The approaching rider moved with deliberate slowness, his black coat inappropriate for the weather, his horse expensive and well-fed. Samuel stood, instinctively moving between the stranger and the children. Something about the man set his nerves on edge. Perhaps the calculating way he surveyed the property, or the cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. McAllister?" The man dismounted with practiced ease. "My name is Cornelius Blackwood. I believe we have business to discuss." "Can't say I know you, Mr. Blackwood." Samuel kept his tone neutral, though his hand stayed near the rifle propped against the porch rail. "No, but you knew Sarah Henley." Blackwood removed papers from his saddlebag. "More precisely, you're caring for her children. Children who, I'm afraid, come with certain encumbrances." Samuel's jaw tightened. "State your business plain." Blackwood's smile widened. "Very well. Sarah Henley owed me $300. Borrowed against future earnings that never materialized. A legal debt. Properly documented." He offered the papers, but Samuel didn't take them. Normally, such debts die with the debtor. However, when there are inheritable assets, these children have no assets. Samuel said flatly, "Their mother died with nothing." "Ah, but they have potential value. Strong, healthy twins. The right family might pay well for such adoptable children. Consider it recovering my investment." The blood drained from Samuel's face. "You're talking about selling children." "I'm talking about settling a lawful debt," Blackwood corrected smoothly. "Unless, of course, their guardian wishes to assume the obligation?" Behind them, Esther laughed at something Jacob had done. The sound was like a knife in Samuel's gut. "You can't be serious. I assure you, I'm entirely serious. $300, Mr. McAllister, plus interest. Let's call it $400 even. Pay it, or I'll petition the court to seize the children as assets." Samuel's mind raced. $400 was more than he'd see in 2 years. Even if the ranch had good seasons, the court gave me custody. You can't just— "The court didn't know about the debt," Blackwood interrupted. "Financial obligations supersede custody arrangements. Ask any lawyer." He glanced at the twins, who were now watching him with solemn eyes. "Charming children. They'd fetch a good price in Denver. Perhaps separate sales would maximize returns. Get off my land." Samuel's voice was low. "Dangerous." Blackwood replaced his hat. "You have 30 days, Mr. McAllister. After that, I file papers. Good day." Samuel watched him ride away, fury and fear warring in his chest. Behind him, Jacob began to fuss. Mechanically, Samuel picked him up, bouncing him while his mind churned. $400. It might as well be 4,000. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Samuel spread his accounts on the table. The numbers mocked him. After the court costs and buying supplies for the children, he had $43 saved. The cattle wouldn't be ready for market until fall. The ranch itself was mortgaged to the hilt. He rode to Tom Wheeler's place, finding his friend mending harnesses in the barn. Tom listened grimly to the story. "Blackwood." Tom spat. "Know of him. Operates out of Denver, lending money to desperate folks, then collecting however he can. Legal as sin and twice as ugly." "I can't lose them. Tom." Samuel's hands clenched. "Not to him. Not like this." Tom was quiet, thinking. "What about Miss Sinclair? She wanted the children. Maybe she'd pay to keep them from Blackwood." Samuel shook his head. "I won't go begging to her, and she'd use it as leverage to take them anyway." "Then we need another way. What about the other ranchers? Maybe a collection? For another man's debt? In this drought?" Samuel knew it was hopeless, even as Tom suggested it. Times were hard for everyone. Over the next days, Samuel explored every option. The bank laughed at his loan request. The few valuables Martha had left, her wedding ring, a cameo brooch, brought only $30. He considered selling the ranch itself, but the mortgage meant he'd get little. And then, where would they live? On the 10th day, salvation came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Morrison arrived in her buggy, her face purposeful. "I've heard about your trouble," she said without preamble. "That vulture Blackwood. The whole town's talking." Samuel said nothing, pride and despair keeping him silent. "There might be a way," she continued. "My cousin in Millbrook. She and her husband have been trying for children for years. They're good people, Samuel, Christians. That is, they've expressed interest in adoption." The words hit Samuel like physical blows. "You're saying I should give up my children?" "I'm saying you should consider all options." Her voice was gentle but firm. $400 is nothing to them. They'd pay Blackwood and give the twins a good home. Better than what I can give?" Samuel finished bitterly. "Mrs. Morrison touched his arm. "I've seen you with those babies. Samuel, no one doubts your love, but sometimes love means making hard choices." After she left, Samuel sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky red. Jacob and Esther played at his feet, babbling to each other in their secret twin language. The thought of waking to silence, of empty arms and an empty house, made him physically ill. That night, he wrote a letter to Miss Sinclair. His hands shook as he penned the words, each one a small death. "Circumstances forced me to reconsider your offer," but he couldn't finish it. Instead, he crumpled the paper and threw it in the stove. There had to be another way. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. An elderly Mexican man leading a pack mule appeared at the gate. Samuel recognized him vaguely. Pablo something, who sometimes passed through trading goods. "Senor McAllister," Pablo said, touching his hat. "I hear you have troubles." Samuel nodded warily. "I have a proposition. My nephew in Mexico, he needs cattle, good breeding stock. The market there pays better than here, gold, not paper money." Samuel's pulse quickened. "How much better?" "Maybe 500-600 for the right animals. But it's dangerous, bandits, desert, federales. Not a trip for family men." Samuel looked back at the house where the twins napped. A dangerous journey versus certain loss. "How long?" 3 weeks. Maybe 4, if all goes well. It was a slim chance, but it was a chance. "I'll need someone to watch the children." Mrs. Thompson, when approached, was reluctant but eventually agreed. "Those babies need you alive. Samuel McAllister, you better come back." Samuel spent 2 days preparing, selecting his best breeding stock, gathering supplies, cleaning and oiling his rifle. The night before departure, he sat with the twins longer than usual, memorizing their faces, the weight of them in his arms. "I'll be back," he whispered. "I swear it. Just need to save our family." The journey was everything Pablo had warned and worse. They lost one cow to a rattlesnake, another to bad water. Bandits struck on the 5th day, but Samuel's marksmanship and Pablo's knowledge of the terrain saw them through. The federales were harder. It took a fee of $50 to smooth their passage. But Pablo had been right about the market. The Mexican rancher, impressed by the cattle's quality, paid in gold coins, $520 worth. Samuel clutched the leather pouch like a lifeline. The return journey passed in a blur of exhaustion and urgency. Every delay chafed at him. Were the twins well? Did they remember him? 23 days after leaving, he crested the hill overlooking his ranch. Mrs. Thompson met him at the door, and for one terrible moment, her serious expression stopped his heart. Then he heard Esther's laugh and Jacob's babbling, and nearly collapsed with relief. "They're fine, Mrs." Thompson said, stepping aside. "Missed you something fierce, but they're fine." The twins were sitting up on their own now, playing with wooden spoons. When they saw Samuel, their faces lit up. "Papa," Jacob said clearly, reaching up. "Papa!" Samuel swept them both into his arms, not caring that he was filthy from the trail, not caring that tears were streaming down his face. They were here. He was here. They were together. 2 days later, he rode to town and found Blackwood at the hotel. The man's eyes widened at the stack of gold coins Samuel counted onto the table. $400, Samuel said coldly. "Plus 20 for your interest. Our business is concluded." Blackwood tested each coin, clearly disappointed. "Indeed it is. Mr. McAllister, a pleasure doing business. No, Samuel said, standing. It wasn't. That night, with the twins asleep and the debt papers burned in the stove, Samuel finally allowed himself to breathe freely. They'd come too close to disaster, but they'd survived. The ranch was still struggling. Money was still tight, but his family was intact. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, but for once, the sound didn't seem threatening. It was just another voice in the vast frontier night, no match for the fierce love that guarded the small house and the precious lives within. The first snows of winter came early that year, catching Samuel unprepared. He'd been so focused on keeping the twins fed and warm that repairs to the barn roof had waited too long. Now, with 2 feet of snow already fallen and more coming, he faced a choice: leave the twins alone while he worked, or risk losing half his winter hay to moisture. Jacob and Esther, now 14 months old, had become expert escape artists. Jacob could climb out of his crib, and Esther had learned to unlatch the lower cabinets. Leaving them unattended, even for an hour, invited disaster. "We'll manage," he told them, bundling both children in layers of wool. "Papa needs helpers today." He fashioned a sling from an old blanket, strapping Esther to his back while Jacob rode in a basket secured near his work area. The twins seemed to think it was a grand adventure, babbling to each other as Samuel climbed the ladder to the barn roof. The work was treacherous. Ice made every step dangerous, and the wind cut through his coat like a knife. His hands, already chapped from constant washing of baby things, cracked and bled as he wrestled with wooden shingles. Every few minutes, he climbed down to check the twins, make sure they were warm enough, offer them bites of bread or sips of warm milk from a bottle. By noon, his back screamed from the unusual burden of carrying Esther while working. Jacob had grown fussy in his basket, wanting to explore. Samuel had barely patched half the roof, and the weather was worsening. "Samuel McAllister, what in the Lord's name are you doing?" He looked down to find Mrs. Morrison in her buggy, her face a mask of disapproval. "Roof needs fixing," he called down, aware of how he must look, a man working construction with babies strapped to him like a pack mule. "Get down here this instant," she commanded. When he complied, she took in the full scene, his bleeding hands, the shivering twins, the half-finished roof. "This is exactly what I mean. Samuel, you can't do everything alone." "I'm managing," he said stubbornly. Though Esther chose that moment to start crying, cold and tired of being confined, Mrs. Morrison fixed him with a stern look. "Pride goeth before a fall, and in your case, that could be literal. Give me those babies. I'll watch them while you finish." "I couldn't ask." "You're not asking. I'm telling." She was already reaching for Jacob. "And when you're done, we're going to talk about getting you some proper help." The roof work went 3 times faster without the children. Still, by the time he finished, his hands were raw and his body exhausted. He found Mrs. Morrison in his kitchen, the twins clean and fed, playing contentedly with pots and wooden spoons. "This can't continue," she said without preamble. "You need help, Samuel, regular help." "Can't afford it," he said shortly, warming his hands by the stove. "The church has a fund, no charity." The words came out harsher than intended. "I'm sorry, but no. These are my children. My responsibility." "Mrs. Morrison sighed. "Your pride will be the death of you, or worse. Harm will come to these precious ones because you're trying to be mother and father and rancher all at once." After she left, Samuel sat watching the twins play, her words echoing. He knew she was right. The incident with Blackwood had drained his savings, and winter was always the hardest season. He was one accident away from disaster. The answer came from an unexpected source. 3 days later, a knock at the door revealed a young woman, perhaps 20, with native features and worn clothing. "Mr. McAllister, I'm Mary Crowfeather. Mrs. Thompson sent me, said you might need help with children." Samuel's first instinct was to refuse, but something in her steady gaze stopped him. "I can't pay much," he said finally. Room and board and a little wage. She said, I'm good with children. Raised my younger siblings after our mother died. Why would you want to work here? Samuel asked. Suspicious of good fortune? Mary's jaw tightened. Townfolk don't much like hiring Indians. You need help. I need work. Seems simple enough. It was simple, and it wasn't. Having another person in the house felt strange after so long alone. But Mary proved as good as her word. She handled the twins with easy competence, sang to them in a language Samuel didn't recognize, taught them games that made them giggle with delight. Within a week, Samuel couldn't imagine managing without her. He could work the ranch properly again, knowing the twins were safe and cared for. Mary cooked meals that actually tasted good, kept the house cleaner than it had been since Martha died, and never complained about the isolated life. The town, predictably, talked. A single man with a young woman under his roof, even with 2 babies as chaperones, set tongues wagging. Samuel ignored it, but he noticed Mary's trips to town for supplies were often cut short. One evening, after the twins were asleep, Samuel found Mary on the porch, staring out at the snow-covered prairie. Trouble in town? He asked carefully. She shrugged. Mrs. Garrett suggested I might be better suited working somewhere else. Somewhere my kind would be more welcome. Anger flared in Samuel's chest. You're welcome here. The twins love you. We need you. Mary smiled slightly. I know. That's why I stay. That and... She hesitated. Your children don't see color, Mr. McAllister. They just see Mary. It's been a long time since anyone looked at me that way. Winter deepened, bringing blizzards that trapped them inside for days. Samuel learned more about Mary, how her father had been a trapper who'd married into the Crow tribe, how she'd been caught between 2 worlds her whole life. Welcome in neither. These little ones, she said one night, watching Esther toddle toward her with arms outstretched. They'll know that feeling too. No real ma, raised different than others. World can be cruel to children who don't fit the expected pattern. They'll be strong, Samuel said firmly. Like their mother was, like you are. Mary gave him a sharp look. You didn't know their mother? No, but she came west alone, pregnant, and made her own way. That takes strength. He paused. Takes strength to stay here too, doing this work, facing what you face in town. Something shifted between them in that moment. An acknowledgement of mutual respect. They were both outsiders in their way, brought together by necessity and held by something deeper. The test came in February. Samuel had ridden to check the far pastures when a blizzard struck without warning. He found shelter in an old line shack, but there was no way to get word to the ranch. For 3 days, the storm raged. When he finally made it home, expecting disaster, he found Mary calmly making breakfast while the twins played. The fire had been kept burning, the animals fed, everything managed. We were fine, Mary said simply. Though they asked for Papa a lot, Esther especially, as if summoned. Esther toddled over, raising her arms. Papa home, she announced clearly. Papa stay. Papa stay. Samuel agreed, lifting her up, over her head. He met Mary's eyes. Thank you. It's my job, she said, but her smile was warm. It's more than that. Samuel said, You're family now, if you want to be. Mary's eyes widened slightly. For a moment, the only sound was Jacob banging a spoon against his high chair. Then she nodded slowly. Family, she agreed. Yes. Spring came slowly that year, but when it did, it found the McAllister ranch changed. The house rang with laughter. The twins thrived under Mary's care, learning words in 2 languages, growing strong and confident. Samuel's ranch work improved with regular help, and for the first time in years, he felt hope for the future. The town might whisper, but inside the small house, a different kind of family had formed, not bound by blood or convention, but by choice and circumstance, and the fierce love they all shared for 2 small children who'd brought them together. When Miss Sinclair's letter arrived in April, announcing a summer visit to check on her cousin's children, Samuel read it without the old fear. Let her come. She'd find Jacob and Esther healthy, happy, and loved. She'd find a home that might not match Baltimore standards, but that sheltered something precious. A real family. Unconventional, perhaps, but unbreakable. The raiders came at dawn on a Sunday morning in late May, when the prairie grass was green and the twins were 2.5 years old. Samuel had taken the children to the creek to wash, leaving Mary to prepare breakfast. The first gunshot shattered the peaceful morning like breaking glass. Samuel dropped the soap and grabbed both twins, running toward the house. 3 riders circled the property, firing into the air, whooping like wild men. He recognized the type, drifters and thieves who preyed on isolated ranches, taking what they could and burning what they couldn't. "Mary!" he shouted, but she was already at the door, his rifle in her hands. Her face was calm, determined. "Get the children to the root cellar," she said quietly. "I'll hold them." "You can't. Go!" She was already raising the rifle, sighting down the barrel with practiced ease. Samuel half carried, half dragged the terrified twins to the root cellar behind the house. It was small, dark, meant for storing vegetables, but it was solid earth and timber. Some protection from bullets and fire. "Stay here," he told them firmly. "No matter what you hear, stay quiet and stay here." Jacob clung to his leg. "Papa scared?" "Papa's going to protect you," Samuel said, kissing both their heads. "Be brave for Esther." He barred the cellar door from outside and ran back to the house, grabbing the shotgun from its place by the door. Mary had taken position at an upstairs window, keeping the raiders at a distance. One man's hat already lay in the dirt, shot clean off his head. "What do they want?" Samuel called up to her. "Everything," she replied grimly. "They're McBride's gang. Heard about them in town. They hit the Sadler place last month." Samuel's blood ran cold. The Sadlers had lost everything, barely escaping with their lives. One of the raiders, a bearded man with cruel eyes, rode closer. "Nice place you got here, farmer." "Be a shame if something happened to it. How about you make this easy? We'll take what we want and leave you breathing." "Get off my land," Samuel shouted back. The man laughed. "Tough talk for a man with 2 whelps to protect. Yeah, we saw you with them brats. Where'd you hide 'em?" Mary's rifle cracked, and dirt exploded near the rider's horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing him. "That's close enough," she called down. The bearded man's face darkened. "An Indian? You got yourself a squaw. Farmer? This gets better and better." Samuel felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Last warning, leave now." "Or what? There's 3 of us, 2 of you, and we know there's kids here somewhere." "Kids make folks do foolish things. Surrender things." The 3rd rider, younger than the others, spoke up nervously. "Cole, maybe we should move on. They're armed, and—" "Shut up, Billy," Cole snapped. Then, louder, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put down those guns and bring out whatever gold you got hidden. Then we'll decide if we want to take the woman and leave. Or—" Mary's next shot took off part of his ear. Cole screamed, clutching the side of his head, blood running through his fingers. "You'll pay for that," he roared. All 3 raiders opened fire on the house. Windows shattered, wood splintered. Samuel fired back with a shotgun, forcing them to spread out. Mary kept up steady fire from upstairs, her aim keeping them from rushing the house. But they were outnumbered, and Samuel knew their ammunition wouldn't last forever. Worse, he could smell smoke. One of the raiders had managed to set fire to the barn. "My horses," Mary called. "The winter hay." "Let it burn," Samuel shouted back. "Stay at your post." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Samuel's world narrowed to loading, aiming, firing, always aware of the root cellar where his children huddled. He took a graze across his shoulder, another on his thigh. Upstairs. Mary had gone quiet, and fear gripped him. "Mary! Mary!" "I'm here," she called back, but her voice was strained. "Running low on bullets." Cole, his ear still bleeding, had taken cover behind the well. "Getting tired in there. Farmer, how long before that squaw runs out of fight? How long before we find where you hid them kids?" Samuel made a desperate decision. "Wait here," he called to Mary, then slipped out the back door. The smoke from the burning barn provided cover as he circled around. The youngest raider, Billy, had separated from the others, watching the front of the house. Samuel crept up behind him, reversed the shotgun, and brought the butt down hard on his head. Billy crumpled without a sound. One down. Samuel took the boy's pistol and ammunition, then continued his circuit. The second raider was harder. He saw Samuel coming and got off a shot that burned across his ribs. But Samuel's return fire was true, catching the man in the shoulder and spinning him to the ground. That left Cole, still behind the well, still shouting threats and obscenities. Samuel could see him from his new position, but the angle was bad for a clean shot, and his ammunition was nearly gone. Then he heard it. Horses approaching fast. His heart sank. More raiders? They couldn't survive another wave, but the riders who crested the hill wore badges. Sheriff Patterson from Cedar Ridge, accompanied by 4 deputies, drawn by the smoke visible for miles. "Drop your weapons!" Patterson bellowed. Cole tried to run for his horse. 3 rifles spoke at once, and he tumbled into the dirt, clutching his leg. The silence after gunfire was deafening. Samuel emerged from cover, legs shaking with exhaustion and relief. Mary appeared in the doorway, blood on her sleeve but still standing. "The children," she said, and they both ran for the root cellar. Jacob and Esther were huddled together in the darkest corner, tear-streaked but unharmed. When they saw Samuel and Mary, they flew into their arms. "Papa hurt?" Esther touched the blood on his shirt with tiny fingers. "Papa's fine," he assured her, holding both twins tight. "Everyone's fine now." Sheriff Patterson surveyed the damage, the burning barn, the bullet-riddled house, the wounded raiders. "McAllister, you folks all right?" "Alive," Samuel said simply. "That's enough." The sheriff nodded. "Tom Wheeler saw the smoke, rode hard to town. We came as fast as we could." He looked at Mary with new respect. "That's some fine shooting, Miss Military trained?" "My father?" Mary said quietly. "He fought in the Mexican War, said a woman alone should know how to protect herself." The aftermath was a blur of activity. The raiders were arrested. The wounded tended. Neighbors arrived to help fight the barn fire. Though they could only save part of the structure, Mrs. Morrison appeared with food and medical supplies, clucking over their injuries like a mother hen. As the sun set, Samuel sat on the damaged porch with Mary, watching the twins play in the yard as if nothing had happened. The resilience of children never ceased to amaze him. "You saved us," he said quietly. "Your shooting, your courage. We saved each other," Mary corrected. "That's what family does." Samuel looked at her, really looked at her. Blood on her sleeve, soot on her face, but steady as bedrock. Something had shifted during the battle. Some last wall fallen. "Mary," he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. She waited, patient as always. "The town talks," he said finally. "About us, about propriety. Today proved we're partners in every way that matters. Would you consider making it official? For the children's sake, but also," he swallowed hard, "also because I can't imagine this life without you in it." Mary was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Are you asking me to marry you, Samuel McAllister?" "I suppose I am, though I'm doing it badly." A smile touched her lips. "I've had prettier proposals. It's true, men who offered me the moon and stars if I'd forget who I am, where I come from." She turned to face him fully. "You've never asked me to be anything but myself." "Yes, Samuel, yes." Inside the house, glimpsed through a broken window, the twins had curled up together for a nap, exhausted by the day's terrors and excitements. Tomorrow would bring challenges, rebuilding the barn, dealing with the town's reaction to their engagement, the ongoing work of the ranch. But tonight, sitting on the bullet-scarred porch with Mary's hand in his, Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced since Martha's death. Complete. They'd faced down death together, protected what mattered most, and emerged stronger. The twins had brought him Mary. Mary had helped him save the twins. And together, they'd built something worth fighting for. A family forged in unlikely circumstances but tempered by trial into something unbreakable. Let the raiders come. Let the town talk. Let the world throw what it would at them. They'd proven today that love and courage and a willingness to fight for each other could overcome any odds. The McAllister family, unconventional, multicultural, and fiercely devoted, would endure. The courthouse looked different in August sunshine than it had during that cold March hearing 2 years ago. Samuel stood before Judge Crawford once again, but this time with Mary beside him in her best dress, the twins fidgeting between them in their Sunday clothes. The same benches that had held curious townspeople now overflowed with genuine well-wishers. "We're gathered here for a joyful purpose," Judge Crawford began, his stern face softened by an almost smile. "To formalize the adoption of Jacob Samuel McAllister and Esther Martha McAllister by Mary Crow, Feather McAllister, and to update the legal records accordingly." The judge's use of Mary's married name sent a ripple of satisfaction through Samuel. Their wedding 3 months prior had been simple, just family and close friends at the ranch, Reverend Dawson presiding. But this, making Mary legally the twins' mother, felt like the final piece clicking into place. "Mrs. McAllister," the judge continued, "do you understand that by this adoption, you accept all rights and responsibilities of motherhood for these children?" "I do, Your Honor." Mary's voice was clear, strong. "They've been mine in my heart since the day I first held them. This just makes it official." Jacob, now an energetic 3-year-old, tugged on Samuel's coat. "Papa, is Mary our real mama now?" "She's always been your real mama," Samuel whispered back. "This just tells everyone else what we already know." Judge Crawford reviewed the papers, testimonies from neighbors about Mary's devotion to the children, Dr. Morrison's statement about their thriving health, even a surprising letter of support from Miss Sinclair, who had visited that spring and been forced to admit the twins were beautifully cared for. "Mr. and Mrs. McAllister," the judge said finally, "it's the judgment of this court that the best interests of these children are served by this adoption. The records will show Mary Crow Feather McAllister as the legal mother of Jacob and Esther McAllister, with all rights therein." The gavel came down, and the courtroom erupted in applause. "Mrs." Thompson wiped tears from her eyes. Tom Wheeler whistled appreciatively. Even Mrs. Garrett, who'd been among the doubters, smiled genuinely. Outside the courthouse, the august heat shimmered off the dusty street. Friends and neighbors surrounded them with congratulations. The twins, overwhelmed by the attention, clung to Mary's skirts. "Mama," Esther said experimentally, looking up at Mary. "My mama." Mary knelt, gathering both children close. "My babies," she murmured, and Samuel saw tears on her cheeks, the first happy tears he'd ever seen her shed. The celebration continued at the ranch. Tables groaned under the weight of dishes neighbors had brought. Tom Wheeler had repaired the barn damage from the raid, refusing payment, calling it a belated wedding gift. The house rang with laughter and music as someone brought out a fiddle. As evening approached, Samuel found himself on the porch with old Pablo, who'd brought his family for the celebration. "You've done well, senor," Pablo said, gesturing at the scene, Mary teaching the twins a crow dancing game while neighbors clapped along. From sorrow, joy. From loneliness, family. This is how life surprises us. "No?" Samuel nodded, remembering that desperate day nearly 3 years ago when he'd stood at the back of a sparse funeral, watching everyone walk away from 2 orphaned babies. He'd been a different man then, bitter, closed off, existing rather than living. "Papa, Mama says come dance!" Jacob ran up, grabbing Samuel's hand with sticky fingers. "Please, Papa!" Samuel allowed himself to be dragged into the circle, where Mary caught his other hand, Esther attached to her hip. They danced clumsily, laughing when they stepped on each other's feet, the twins shrieking with delight as the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, The party gradually wound down. Neighbors departed with hugs and promises to visit. Tom Wheeler helped clean up, grumbling good-naturedly about folks who throw parties bigger than their house. Finally, it was just the four of them. The twins, exhausted from the day's excitement, had fallen asleep on a blanket spread on the porch. Samuel and Mary sat in their rocking chairs, watching the stars emerge. "No regrets?" Samuel asked quietly. "You could have had an easier life, married someone without so many complications." Mary reached over, taking his hand. "Easier isn't always better. I have you. I have them. I have a home where I'm loved for who I am, not in spite of it. What more could I want?" They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, crickets, a distant coyote, the wind through the grass. The twins stirred in their sleep, moving closer together as they always did. "I've been thinking," Mary said eventually, "about what Judge Crawford said, about making things official." "Everything is official now," Samuel assured her. "The adoption papers?" "Not that." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "I mean about their names, their full names." Samuel waited, knowing Mary would explain in her own time. "They should know all of who they are." She continued, "Not just McAllister, but Crowfeather too. Jacob Samuel, Crowfeather McAllister, Esther Martha Crow, Feather McAllister. Let them carry both our names, both our strengths." Samuel squeezed her hand. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, that's right." A cool breeze stirred, and Esther whimpered in her sleep. Without discussion, Samuel scooped her up while Mary gathered Jacob. They carried the twins inside to their bedroom, a proper children's room now, with real beds Tom had built and curtains Mary had sewn. As they tucked the children in, Samuel was struck by how natural this felt, the four of them moving in practiced harmony. A family shaped by choice and circumstance, and love stronger than any blood tie. "Story," Jacob mumbled, half awake. "Mama, story." Mary sat on the edge of his bed, her voice soft in the darkness. "Once, there were two babies born in a storm. They had no mama, no papa, just each other and the cold world. But a lonely man with a good heart said, 'I'll be your papa.' And a woman who didn't fit anywhere said, 'I'll be your mama.' And together they made a family." "Good story," Esther murmured from her bed. "More tomorrow?" "Always more tomorrow," Mary promised. "Later." As Samuel banked the fire and checked the locks, habits born from the raid that would never fully fade, he found Mary on the porch again, wrapped in a shawl. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, joining her. "Too happy to sleep," she admitted. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find this was all a dream." "It's real," Samuel assured her. "Every bit of it." They stood together, looking out at their land, the rebuilt barn, the thriving garden, the pastures where cattle grazed. It wasn't a wealthy spread, might never be, but it was theirs, and it was home to something precious. "Sarah Henley," Mary said suddenly. "I think about her sometimes. Wonder if she knows her babies are loved, that her sacrifice wasn't in vain." "She knows," Samuel said firmly. "Somewhere, somehow. She knows." A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Mary smiled. "Make a wish?" Samuel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "No need. I've got everything I could wish for right here." Inside the house, one of the twins called out in their sleep, a wordless sound of contentment, not distress. The parents listened, ready to respond if needed, but the child settled again. "Tomorrow we start harvesting," Samuel said eventually. "Jacob wants to help, says he's big enough. He'll tire out in an hour," Mary predicted. "But Esther will probably work all day just to prove she can do anything her brother can." They knew their children so well now, their strengths, their fears, their dreams just beginning to form. They'd watched first steps, heard first words, soothed nightmares, and celebrated small victories. They'd earned the titles Mama and Papa, through countless acts of love and sacrifice. As they finally headed inside to bed, Samuel paused in the doorway of the children's room. Moonlight through the window illuminated two small faces, peaceful in sleep. Jacob had kicked off his blanket as usual. Esther clutched her beloved rag doll. "Our children," he whispered, still marveling at the words. "Our children," Mary agreed, fixing Jacob's blanket with practiced hands. "Forever and always." They closed the door softly and headed to their own room, tired but content. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: harvest and weather, the ongoing work of the ranch, the twins' boundless energy and endless questions. But tonight, the McAllister family was complete, official, unbreakable. Love had built this family from sorrow and loneliness. Love had defended it against those who would tear it apart, and love would carry it forward into whatever future awaited on the vast frontier. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the prairie, the sound of a changing world, of progress and possibility. But inside the small ranch house, 4 hearts beat in the ancient rhythm of family, of belonging, of home. Thank you for listening to this story of love and family in the American frontier. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this tale from the Wild West, don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Samuel, Mary, and the twins' journey. Your support means the world to us.